Wait for it. Wait for it. And we're live. Hey, all you crazy sci fi and fantasy fans. It's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just a couple of nerdy veterans and one chaos coordinator geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast that puts the fun in dysfunction. So without further ado, we're going to let our guests introduce themselves to our listeners and viewers at home. We're going to start with Mr. Christopher Denote.
Hey, everybody. Chris Denote. I go by Moggs. I got an Amazon author page, write some else sci-fi and some other stuff.
All right. And then next we have Mr. David Shady Shadoin. And I probably butchered your last name again, and I get bonus points for consistency. Consistently wrong.
No, you actually got it right that time. But I'm Shady.
I've got a streak of one.
There you go. Keep it going. And I do some mill sci-fi, some fantasy, and when I'm not too busy doing podcasts.
Outstanding. And next, and certainly not least, we have Mr. William Joseph Roberts, otherwise known as Hillbilly.
Howdy.
All right. And that's one heck of an introduction, people. He also likes long walks in the country, chasing the dueling banjos with his shotgun, because reasons.
You got a pretty mouth, JR.
All right. So the next part of the introduction, dear listeners, how we first found them. So we actually all met in a self-help group. We were trying to overcome our compulsive need to correct the TV when they got the military stuff wrong. But at the end, we all agreed that everyone else was wrong and we were right. So screw them. And that's how we met. True story. Does that sound about right to you, Nick?
It does. And I slammed it down with my utmost authority because now I have the vet beard going on.
Nice. We appreciate that. All right. And so because they've all been on the show before and they've answered the original religion questions, and given the topic today is representation of air power in military sci-fi, the question...
We're switching it up, right? With the religion today?
We are. So,
Iron Eagle. I await on pins and needles, sir.
Nick, hush. Iron Eagle, Top Gun, or Behind Enemy Lines?
Oh.
Will you ask it first?
All right, you're going first, Chris. We've just decided.
Okay. Top Gun. Mainly because the magic gun never needing to be refueled F-16. That's probably why. And Behind Enemy Lines. No, I'm just saying over Iron Eagle. Over an Iron Eagle because of the magic F-16. Never needs to be refueled. And Behind Enemy Lines, the missile that can do a lot of things that real-life missiles can't do, and that just broke my brain watching it. So, yeah.
All right, what about you, Hillbilly?
That's a tough choice, man. I mean, okay, Top Gun is Navy. Iron Eagle, it's at least Air Force. But, oh my God, okay, the pilot's son is not going to steal an F-16 and get away with it. It just doesn't happen, man. Behind Enemy Lines,
I stole a tank from the Missouri National Guard once.
Well, that's different. I could probably steal a tank.
Well, it was a Bradley
Guard,
but
Behind Enemy Lines was a pretty damn good movie. I mean, lots of good action, lots of good scenes. Yeah, missiles don't do a lot of what they had, but still, it's a hard choice. I mean, if I gotta stick with my Air Force bros, it's got to be Iron Eagle, even though it's horrible.
So the problem with Iron Eagle,
Jr.
The problem with Iron Eagle is that much like Home Alone, there were sequels. You get away with something that ballsy once, but to have it happen again, that's where I lose my disbelief.
There were 4 movies altogether in the Iron Eagle series. And they kept getting worse.
I didn't know
the most true thing in Iron Eagle, though, is bros listening to music in the cockpit, though. I mean, that's true. That's 100% true.
Oh, I loved it when we were deployed because, we'd be sitting there on the line waiting for launch, and they'd have AC/DC or whatever cranked up on a CD player or tape deck that they had slaved into the comm system. It's like, okay, cool, we'll get tunes today. It's all good. And they, I was on E-models on a couple of deployments, so they'd be gone for 12, 14 hours. They'd come back finally. It's like, okay, well, next shift got them. We're going out. We're going back to do whatever.
Nice. All right, what about you, Shady?
Oh, it's a toss-up between Behind Enemy Lines and Top Gun, but I'm probably going to have to give it to Top Gun because I actually rewatch that more often.
All right, that's fair. That's fair. Nick?
The first Iron Eagle. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love Top Gun. I have the need for speed, but Iron Eagle was cool until we got the sequel and we got the Fat Airborne Ranger supply dude, and I was like, ugh.
So
I didn't get fat as an Airborne Ranger until way later in my career.
So I was a Navy brat and grew up around the Oceana Naval Air Base, and so there was lots of pilots, and they tended to get bad reputations for being overly sure of themselves. So I liked Iron Eagle more growing up because they weren't Navy, and the idea of just stealing a fighter jet just sounded cool because reasons. I mean, what little boy doesn't want to steal cool stuff?
The premise was cooler for Iron.
Yeah,
the premise was cooler.
Although, I mean, you would think that wasn't possible logically, but then I remember a couple years ago that drunk LT stole a tank. It was like going down the freeway in a slow speed chase with the local cops. So I mean,
that was like an old 577, like an M577, like the old C2 vehicles is what I think he stole, because it was some guard unit, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a guard unit, but I thought it was a tank. I seem to remember it was tracked, but I'd have to look it up.
It was tracked. It was tracked. Yeah, I mean, the one thing
they made a movie based on that.
But the movie's older than this.
Really?
Tank.
I do remember.
Yeah,
I just remember that there was a story about a Marine, like a Marine who did take a jet up for a joyride once, an enlisted Marine maintainer. I think it might have been an A4 or something like that. He actually managed to make it.
Wasn't it?
Yeah, he actually managed to get it back down again. I don't remember. It was something, man. For some reason, I think it's one of those old.
Is that a Pendleton? It was a Harrier type jet. I remember that.
Yeah. No, I think it was an A4 Skyhawk, but I'd have to go back and look, man. You know, the little stubby, attack jet they used to have.
So in 1995, someone stole a tank from the California Army National Guard and took it on a rampage. They described it as a rampage for about 6 miles, and it doesn't say an M60A3 was stolen in 95, but the one I was thinking about was the Army personnel carrier stolen from Virginia Army National Guard base, and that
the 118, yeah,
he stole the 118. It looks like.
Oh, okay, that's it. Yeah, but hey, it seems to be a trend item here every couple of years.
Like I said, I stole a Bradley. I didn't make it out of the front gate, but me and my buddy, we stuck into the Missouri National Guard, and they left the hatch unlocked, and the key's still in the ignition.
I mean, they were just asking for it.
I was 10 years old. I stole a Bradley.
All right, so Jamie, since you're here, do you have a favorite Iron Eagle, Top Gun, or Behind Enemy Lines?
I gotta go with Top Gun.
That bar scene, like
I have no reasons. It's just superior.
Okay, all right. I mean,
it's the volleyball scene.
It's the volleyball.
Yeah.
All right.
I've been to the bar 3 times. I've been to that bar.
All right, now we're gonna put your old folks noggin on and be a blast from the past. So Tora Tora Tora, Pearl Harbor, or Memphis Belle.
Oh.
Okay, I'm gonna go with Tora 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 because I just think it's the best movie out of the 3. Memphis Belle is good, but I thought Tora Tora was the better one. And then what was the other one? Pearl Harbor. Don't get me started on that, man. I got a military history degree. Don't get me started on that one.
All right, what about you, Jamie? Since you're there, you got a favorite?
Not really, but if I had to pick, I would also go with Tora Tora Tora.
Okay. All right, Hillbilly.
See, I'm partial to Memphis Belle just because one of my grandpas was a tail gunner on a B-17.
Okay.
But it's also more of a drama. It's not so much of an action. Tora Tora Tora, though, I mean, that one just keeps you riveted, man. It keeps you rolling through.
Tora 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 used some of the original film from the fighters too, didn't it? Didn't it use some of the original gun cam
archival footage. Yeah.
And so, Pearl Harbor, it was pretty. I mean, the cinematics were great on it. They didn't get a lot of stuff right. I mean, they did put the 44th in the right place though, because they were the ones defending on the ground. That was kind of cool.
They did get one thing right where they told him he was a top secret mission and they asked him what that was. And his answer was something like, that's the one where they give you lots of medals and they mail them home to your next of kin.
Yep.
That part checks out.
This is an homage, sir.
So, all right. What about you, Shady? Tora, Pearl Harbor, or Memphis Belle?
I'm gonna have to be the gainsayer here and say Pearl Harbor because it really was cinematically beautiful, and I don't even care how accurate it was. It was just, to me, it was entertainment when it came out. However, Tora was also a really good story handled well. So,
Yep. All right, and one more for the road. So, Flyboys, Tuskegee Airmen, or the Red Baron? David, you're thinking hard on it. What do you think?
All I'll say is I haven't actually seen any of the three.
Oh, you froze.
oh,
He must have been saying something scandalous, and the censors didn't want us to hear.
that's exactly what it was. He didn't. He was saying he didn't see any of the three, and that was the first mistake.
Yeah.
Now, so Flyboys though, however, was really good. I saw Tuskegee. I got to see Tuskegee early, and that one was also a really good movie. But I'm gonna have to go with Flyboys because it just stuck with me more.
Okay, Hillbilly.
I've not seen Tuskegee or Flyboys. What was the third one?
Red Baron.
That
came out in 2018.
Yeah, see, okay, I don't watch a lot of TV or movies anymore. I really haven't in almost the last 20 years, honestly. So I'm behind on a lot of that.
Valid.
Yeah, I got nothing
Jimmy,
on that one, man.
Honestly, Flyboys was pretty good.
Okay. Yep. I've seen Flyboys. I've liked all three of them, but the Tuskegee Airmen, I actually knew one of those guys. One of the guys in the second class of aviators from the Tuskegee Airmen was actually at the Hampton VA as a volunteer when I was going through. And I remember the first time they gave me a cane because I was struggling with mobility when I hurt my back. From that last IED, and he was standing there, and you got to picture this. He's wearing a purple suit with like the black pinstripe on him, and he's got this wooden cane with a silver eagle head handle, and he's got a pimp hat, and he just looks at me and he goes, "Son, if you're gonna get a cane, you need a pimp cane." And he said it with this like Louisiana drawl that I just can't even like fathom trying to replicate. And I was like, this guy is awesome. And so one of the times I was there, I ended up taking him out to lunch just because I wanted to like hear more from him, like hear his stories. And he was telling me when that movie was coming out that his class would have been the one running in formation when they were going up in the air because they were the second class. So they were still at the not touching planes phase. And so just because I know somebody, or I've talked to somebody, I should say, from the Tuskegee Airmen, I'm going with that one.
I think it's because I see too many documentaries and all this stuff. And, like I said, I get disappointed real easily in movies like this. Flyboys is, of the three, I think it's the best film. I'll agree with that.
I agree.
And, as far as the Tuskegee Airmen, that was actually one of the cool things about deploying when I did was the wing I got to be in was actually carries the lineage of the 332nd Fighter Group. That was the Tuskegee Airmen,
Nice.
World War II. So it's kind of neat. It's neat to get a connection like that. I got pictures of the memorial we had, and it had good Red Tails art and stuff on it all there. So, it's pretty neat.
There's also the movie Red Tails, but we didn't put that one on because, as Nick said, it's a trash movie, and the Tuskegee Airmen was a better film.
I will take that back.
Lucas
I have seen Flyboys. I had to look it up, but I have seen Flyboys after all.
Okay. But not enough that it was good enough that you would remember. That's not saying much, Billy.
It's a good movie.
Well, if we're talking about it, I'll make a recommendation here if you can. Go look up Blue Max if you can. I think it's on Amazon Prime for free. It's got George Peppard, Hannibal from the A-Team.
Oh,
and he's a German World War I pilot, right? And that's one I would recommend going to look up. That was pretty good. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but I remember it being really good.
What just got released, which I'm really looking forward to watching, is Masters of the Air, which deals with a lot of the World War I fighter pilots, the first fighter pilots, if you will. So I'm really looking forward to that, but we didn't throw that in the list because I don't think anybody's seen it yet. It's on Apple.
It's on Apple TV, so I don't know how many people actually have it. It's based on a book about the 8th Air Force, So it is. It's bomber centric in there, and one of the there's a lot of good books on that subject too. That's one thing we'll probably hit a lot in this one is nonfiction books actually about some of this stuff.
Can I toss one in there for you?
Sure.
Black Sheep Squadron.
Oh, I've watched that one. That's about the Marines,
That's a
right?
good one.
Yeah, they were flying the F-4 Corsairs back World War II Pacific Theater. I could not get enough of the Black Sheep Squadron TV show. It came out in the 70s, and I just devoured it. But it brought to light a lot of stuff. I mean, shit. Even when I was in, tactical acquisitions was a thing. If you needed something, you made sure you had it. Didn't matter if the other squadron didn't have it.
That's that old line in the military. There's only one thief in the military, and everyone else is just trying to get their shit back.
Yeah, that's
Gear
right.
adrift is a gift. I learned
The
that
Marines
from a
taught me
Marine
that
Corps guy that I was friends with. Yep.
A radar.
Gear adrift is
Where
a
did
gift.
Hawkeye get that radar? Where did that Jeep come from?
That's the one it came in, sir.
Radar. Change the numbers on that Jeep.
Yes, sir.
Oh, the PSI on any Humvee. I mean, the E4 Mafia was on top of that shit.
we did have a rule. We didn't steal from other frontline units. So if they were going into combat, like we didn't take their stuff. But in the support units, their
That's
shit
your
was
rule,
broken.
not mine. I stole a
That
lot
was-
of shit.
That was my rule. I didn't want to take from someone else that was going outside the wire. I had
Yeah,
Gear
that
standards.
makes sense.
unsecured was procured. That's the
Most of the
motto
time,
I made.
most of the time, if we were taking something, it was from another squadron's bar or on a spirit mission or something like that, and see how long we could hold on to it, just as long as we didn't destroy anything.
So I was in Iraq when we were taking stuff in 05 when it was all about what they called the hillbilly armor or a few other names that aren't safe for modern radio. And so we had to liberate
Frankenstein armor.
Yeah, Frankenstein armor. There we go. We had to liberate equipment just to add body armor to our vehicles. So
Some worked, some not so much, which is still stuck in my rib cage.
yeah, and the turrets weren't as all encompassing as the modern ones are. And I'm like, are you really even in a turret? And some of these modern ones are basically in like a little dome bubble of like bulletproof everything. Does that really count as a turret ride? I mean, should it? I don't know.
I'd give anything to go back to that part in my life where
Yes.
danger was real.
All right.
Right?
Were you
That's
saying
probably
something, Chris?
the most alive I've ever felt in my life.
Chris, were you saying something? You're muted.
No, I did. I just couldn't hear that last bit. It was broken and unreadable. So
All right, we're
internet
just gonna.
seems to be
Sorry,
bitching.
satellite.
All right, and so the last part of this little bit of a religion question before we dive into the topic is what's everyone's beverage of choice? Coffee, tea, hot chocolate. What is everyone up to tonight? Oh, well, it's hillbilly, so there's at least some booze involved.
There was earlier. I'm on coffee.
Nice.
Yeah,
JD?
just fizzy water, unleaded.
Okay.
Unleash the Kraken.
Nice. Shady.
I had a girl.
Oh, I'm just finishing up the coffee mixed with some Irish cream, some mint and vanilla Irish cream.
Nice. All right. Nick is listening to doctor's orders, I'm sure, and drinking plenty of water, correct?
Actually, I'm allowed one alcoholic beverage a day because I'm on blood thinners, and they actually recommended one alcoholic beverage a day to help with the blood thinning so I don't have a secondary stroke.
Is this one of those things where you've got a cup that's big enough to put like a dead baby in it, and freaking, like it's 2 bottles of wine deep, and
It's an 8-ounce Yeti, and I've had 3 of them because anything worth doing is worth overdoing. If I'm going to die, I'm going to die fucking fat and happy.
Oh, friggin' standing. All right. So normally we would ask if we had veterans and there was an individual interview about their military experience, how it affects their creativity. We've stopped doing that, if you've noticed, in group chats because it slows the conversation we're here to have. But since today's topic is air power and its representation in military sci-fi, I figured I'd give everyone a chance to state a little bit about their military experience, so that way people can listen or not accordingly. So, Chris, you mind telling us a little bit who you are and what you did?
Yeah, I'm a career Air Force officer. I've spent most of my time in as an intel guy too. From an aviation side, early part of my career was with fighters. Went to the weapons school out at Nellis. Spent a tour with the B1s. Done a little bit of everything. Staff job, squadron command. Deployed to Iraq. Did OEF with the B1s back in 2004. Did Iraq in 2009. Done just a lot of maybe too much staff time. But let's say even did
That's the
Air
Alpha
Expeditionary.
dilemma.
They even did Air Expeditionary Group Command, and that actually they put the intel guy in charge of a squadron of fighters, a couple tankers, and an AWACS or two, and about 400 airmen spread across Canada and a few other bases in the Great White North. And I can say now that I did something during that exercise that I would have killed the younger me, who couldn't believe that nobody gave a damn about the intel brief in the scenario. But here I am sitting as a bird colonel, worrying about the MC rates on the jets, and I'm like, will somebody get the damn intel guy off the stage so I can talk to the maintenance folks and get back to figuring out if I got enough gas to do this? And I'm sitting there going, I don't believe what I just said, and I'm looking in the mirror going later that night going, who are you?
So since Jamie is here, if I understand correctly, when you were in the Army, didn't you plan on shooting at the jets? Wasn't that your job in the Army?
Pretty much. I was an air defense artillery officer, and that's sort of what we do. It's all about the SAMs.
It flies, it dies, right?
It flies, it dies. That's
Fly
from below.
Fly swatter.
Hillbilly, talk to me.
I turned wrenches on F-15s my entire career. Unfortunately, I was only here for about 10 years before they booted me on a medical. But,
okay.
I played with
It flies, it dies.
Yeah, F-15Cs, Ds, and Es. Turned some wrenches on a couple of A-10s, 16s, F-4s. Played with some Luftwaffe jets at one point.
Interesting.
But, I was a mechanic, man. Made up to staff sergeant. Ran shifts for second and third shift for years. I love my job. We worked hard. We played hard.
All right, and Shady, what did you do in the wild blue yonder?
I was a helicopter pilot. Well, still technically am. Although all my current buddies that I fly with here are giving me shit about carrying my duct tape around. They're like, "What are you gonna do with that thing?" I was like, "Well, fix the problem." That's what I do with it.
David, how long ago was that? When did you get out?
I'm still in.
You're still
I just took the Air Force blood money.
But you happen to know a warrant officer named Ian Cock?
Not off the top of my head, but
I feel like a name like that you'd remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was training pilots back in the day, not too long ago actually. But I'll talk with you offline about this because I have a feeling we have a connection there.
All right, and so just so you know, my experience with air power is limited to I walked out 4 pairs of the old black combat boots when I was still light infantry and 2 pairs of desert boots. I walked through those as well, so I'm totally qualified to talk about anything in the air.
I've called in 2 A-130 missions. I've called in 2 Spectre ships and 1 A-10.
We called in Army air support once, and then they said, "Screw you guys," so we called snipers instead.
I started off.
Well, shit, man, that was me.
With F-16 intel and A-10 intel. Did a year at the A-10 squadron in Korea, and that was kind of how I learned the basics of all it. Did a lot with the rescue helos too. So that was sort of how I built my foundation and learning all that stuff. And full disclosure, I actually started off in pilot training. Didn't quite work out, but flew the mighty T-37 Tweet for a while, which now all of those are retired as well. So there's. You want to talk about feeling weird when a jet I get it now. Like when something you flew is like completely gone and in the boneyard, you're just like, wow, that's.
Chris, I'm about to lose both of my aircraft because I trained on the T6 and that's getting replaced, and the Huey will eventually at some point get replaced by the MH-139. I'm going to have flown both aircraft into the graveyard. I don't know.
I broke my ass on the Huey once.
So I'm going to show you one of the. We've actually got rare footage of when Hillbilly was in the Air Force. One of the vehicles he worked on. You guys ready to see this?
Oh dear Lord!
Yeah.
You don't know, but the bell bottoms and cowboy hat on the other side of that Viper. That's totally Hillbilly.
I believe it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he rocked the bell bottoms hardcore. I love it. I
Hell
respect
yeah.
it. Respect.
He's got the ankles for that shit, man.
Back when the Star Wars was more than just a movie.
Star Wars and shit back in the day.
Right.
Where the hell is it?
Don't blame me. His wife gave me that picture. It's all good. She wanted us to use it. All right. So we're going to start with now that we've got the preliminaries out of the way. So this topic originally came to me because Denote and I were just BSing, and he thought it was something that could make an interesting discussion. So let's start with, how do you think air power is generally represented in military sci-fi? And Denote, since it was your idea, I'm gonna let you go first.
Okay. I think a lot of authors do a really good job of the tactical stuff in action, especially when it comes to ground support, to be honest with you. And I think that's just because of the experience of a lot of the mil sci-fi writer crowd and the experience of a lot of the audience. I do think too that everybody's kind of stuck in Vietnam and earlier, in terms of what they want to write and how they maybe still think things actually still are, and also because of all the movies that have influenced what we watch. And, Star Wars, I think, did a huge number on us in terms of what we expect, aerial combat is, or space combat, is going to look like. Thing is, and, is if you really wanted to write contemporary stuff, we'll say anything 1981, when the first Gulf of Sidra incident happened and the Navy shot down a couple Libyan jets, up to the present day, I think for most people it'd be really boring, because there'd be a lot of radio. It would just be really short radio calls, a lot of call outs, and a lot of AMRAAMs going all over the place, from the beyond visual range fight, and that's the end of that. But and from what I've seen, I think a lot of people don't get how air power and just how air forces work above like the tactical level. You know what I mean? Like saying like how you would use them planet wide, for example. You don't see that kind of a whole heck of a lot, or unless you're running something that calls back to World War II, and that's how you end up with stupid bombers in space, like the latest round of Star Wars fan fiction.
For the cinematics of it, and they did pretty damn good. Starship Troopers, the movie, for all the landing craft and all that coming in, that's just like Normandy beachhead. So they didn't do half bad there. I mean, you don't have
ridiculous as that film is.
Huh?
I said, as ridiculous as that film is, being a big fan of the original novel, they portrayed the DSTs, or OSTs, whatever you want to call them, your dropship troopers or your orbital ship troopers, being covered by air support. They did a really good job in the movie.
Yeah.
And actually, one of the things I liked along those lines is I thought the 2004 reboot of Battlestar Galactica did a really good job about sort of that ops maintenance relationship.
Oh, God.
What I mean? Especially in the third season. They really nailed that well.
Everything they did in the reboot on Battlestar was just absolutely beautiful, I thought, because, being down in the working maintenance, it's like, yeah, okay, there's the crew chiefs, there's the one that the expediters got to get everything else going. I mean, I was home when I was in the hangar with them, and then seeing the maneuvers and the way they were working the ships, they pulled off great realistic physics for the fighters, because I mean, it's like they're just zipping around and doing their shit, but it's not aircraft movements in space like you have in most other science fiction. Probably the Battlestar reboot is one of the best ever.
Yeah, I thought for depicting a military like that, they did a great job.
I hear Babylon 5 gets a lot of the fighter stuff right as well. I haven't actually seen that one yet. It's on my to-be-watched list.
Space Above and Beyond did a great job too.
What do you think about that, Shady?
Well, I was gonna say it's always tough, right? Moving what we know into space, because you're taking some guesses at some of the physics, but as far as like just the general representation, mil sci-fi writers in general just always do better at representing tactics, at representing like the particulars, almost to a point like that you have certain writers that are known for how well and how detailed they are, whether they had dealings with it or not. But like the Star Wars version versus the Battlestar Galactica version versus the Stargate version of like space fighters and spacecraft. It gets, you're kind of guessing a little bit based on what we know of the physics of space, but maybe not so much what we know of where the tech's going to be.
So
That's
the one,
a good point too.
and I don't know how true this is, but I got a friend of mine that was a Zoomie who was in the Air Force, and his complaint about Stargate was the Atlantis spinoff where they had the main ground force commander also happened to have flown fighter jets, and oh, by the way, he was also a helicopter pilot. And the idea that he was cross-rated in ground air and fixed wings and rotary, that was where he broke for him.
I know a general who has a very similar credit roll.
Really?
So it's not unheard of.
When you have a star, you've probably done a whole bunch of shit.
Yeah.
That
He was a
makes
Marine guy.
sense. But when you got guys like John Rambo that were like first sergeants, and they're rated and all this type of avionics. Not only that, but they're also an 11 or 18 Bravo. It gets into the realm of ridiculousness, which most people are going to buy into. And
two of the three.
Well, like
I would say like two of those three, right?
Space Above and Beyond.
Yeah,
I've got to look this up.
2/3 of it is believable.
I've never seen Space Above and Beyond. I've got to look this one up.
It's good,
dude.
It's
a great series. It really is. It's about the Fighting 58th, I think, was their squadron.
Most
Marine Corps
90s,
squadron.
I missed a lot of stuff. I mean, I had to backtrack to watch DS9, Voyager, Red Dwarf, stuff like that because I was deployed.
Yeah, if you're gonna pick up a '90s sci-fi speculative fiction series, I think Space Above and Beyond is great because it deals with a lot of things. It deals with cloning. It deals with a lot of things. Space combat, ground combat, which the 58th, the wild cards, quote unquote, they were able to do both things. So they're doing space stuff. They're doing ground assault stuff. It just dove headfirst into the craziness of speculative fiction, and it tried to make it to be a hodgepodge of multiple things. Because, like, I'm a huge fan of aerial combat. I'm a huge fan of ground combat because I'm an infantry guy. So this series is just on the fantastical of stuff. So it's definitely enjoyable. If you suspend disbelief about a fighter pilot squadron that is doing ground combat, SEAL, Ranger stuff,
right?
It's good fun television, and it's very '90s. So it feels like everything's a Jerry Bruckheimer film, which is great. If you just want to have some popcorn fiction, is what I like to call it, you're gonna have a great time, and don't try to read into stuff because it won't make sense.
Right. You got to just shut all that off. I can't watch anything with aircraft because I start picking crap out.
Well, I mean, we're dealing with space aircraft, and they deal with thrusters as far as maneuverability and stuff, like ion engines, like in Star Wars. So there's a little bit of physics mixed in there that kind of makes it a little bit believable. I think that kind of takes the edge off the disbelief of things because it does use thruster technology to steer itself. And they had their own Red Baron in the series, which is great. It's probably one of my favorite sci-fi series, that deals with a lot of stuff, aerial combat and ground combat.
But it's I like that better than, say, the approach some people take, which is to kind of hand wave aircraft or whatnot away entirely. Like, two that come to mind for me is Steve Jackson games, the Ogre game in the Ogre universe, and the justification they use there is that the weapons have, that talked about things like hypersonic weapons and things like that back in the 70s, right? So it's just, aircraft technology is not going to be able to keep up. So we don't want to model and sim that for the game. So we're just going to pretend that doesn't even exist. It's not a thing anymore. Or like you take the approach, and I love the stories, but John Ringo's all the Nada series. That's the Pozzoline one with the armored combat suits and all. The idea is that the alien technology is so far ahead of anything that we have that it pretty much, if it flies, it dies, literally, period, dot, end of statement, so don't bother. And it's like, okay, that's one way you can do it. And I get it if you want to focus on like the ground pounder stuff, especially in armored suits. Hey, really cool. But I'm also sitting there going like, yeah, there's also a part of me that says you just kind of didn't want to deal with it either. Or didn't know how to. And I'm not throwing shade on John or anybody else. It's just, what they want to emphasize and what, maybe what they're more comfortable or familiar with.
So what about you, Shady? You've been a little bit quiet.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, like the Chris Moggs had made me think that because he brought up the suits. One of the things that I do love is the Gundam series, right? Like essentially your fighter pilots, your pilots in general, just become mech pilots. Pacific Rim ran with that idea as well, and that's to me, that is kind of a logical step in conclusion. So if instead of waving it away, now granted, you will always have transport. That's a thing that you're going to always have. But at the same time, like instead of waving it away, you'd be like, well, most of these people became essentially Gundam mech pilots, right? Because that's where we need them now. That's where their skill set moves.
So I like that because it's like, or you go all the way back to Macross and you can have your cake and eat it too, where you've got fighter jets that transform into giant mechs. And so the skill set, totally transfers over. And it's funny, that series left a huge impression on me because I saw it when it was Robotech, 1985 when it came out. I was about 8. Right. And between that and then you get hit with Top Gun a year later. And of course, I'd seen Battlestar Galactica on reruns. We watched Star Wars when I was a kid a lot. And between that and some of y'all might be old enough to remember Star Blazers also. That's what did it. That's what got me totally interested in the Air Force and in airplanes and air power in general was those shows. Plus, like getting interested in all World War II era stuff like Hillbilly brought up. So, I mean, that's what did it. But, Shady's point is a good one about that, too, because like mech pilots, that's actually gets the pilot and especially like fighter jock pilot culture right, too, which is its own little, world, its own little universe a lot of times as well. It's real different than, some of the other organizations and military cultures we're all familiar with.
So let's talk about that culture for a little bit, because that's one of the things, you would think about that some sci-fi is going to get right and some isn't. Do you feel like the culture they put around the kind of people that are the maintainers and the flyers of the various craft, be it mech, orbital drop craft or fighter jets in space or whatever, do you think they get the culture part right? Or is it too Hollywood?
It depends. I mean, Battlestar Galactica, the reboot, they absolutely got that culture right, at least on the crew dog side. Pilot side, I don't know all of what happened on the pilot side of stuff, but all the hangar stuff, all the maintenance stuff, yeah, that they were dead on that. But there's not much difference between what we had on the flight line versus what they have on a Navy carrier either for the air captains and stuff.
Okay, what do you think, Shady?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about like Gundam kind of got it right. Like if we go there, Pacific Rim definitely had its moments where the culture really shines through and you see kind of the differences. But it is interesting sitting from the Hilo perspective where like you recognize that there is like different cultures even amongst the helicopter world, right? Like the 60 guys are different than the Huey guys, which are different than the Apache guys, and the Apache guys tend to act a lot more like fighter pilots, and it all depends on who you work for, typically.
Oh, we had that, meet up in 16 guys, and they were totally different from all the F-15 guys we knew.
Yeah,
absolutely. And it's even funny to think. I mean, like I've had enough opportunities to go out to like Nellis for Red Flag, and also for different events at the weapons school, and you see all the different tribes together and how they're different. You know what I mean? And it's really an interesting thing to see. And then you bring the Navy players in, with the F-18s or with the Prowlers when we had those, or you bring the Army guys in, Apache dudes, or amongst like Shady brought up with helicopter culture, it's way different there too. And the way they interact with each other, the things they care about, the things they train against, it's really interesting to just see the difference in mentality, and also traditions and everything else. I mean, I've still got my party shirt from Osan and a few other knickknacks kicking around too. So, you become immersed in it, even if you're a support guy, like I've been.
Okay. Well, before we keep talking about all things air power and Mill Sci-Fi, we're going to pause for a moment while we shamelessly shill for the man, and you'll see why this was the sponsor today.
Van, I know this is hard for you to accept or even believe, but you're not imagining this. You're not going crazy. Your grandfather believed right down to the core of his being in protecting those who couldn't protect themselves.
You expect me to believe that my grandfather was a star-faring soldier?
I can prove it to you.
And how are you going to do that?
By taking you for a flight. Whenever you're ready, Van.
All right. Thank you for sticking with us through that commercial interlude. And with that as the commercial, you understand why it had to be the one for today's episode. Would you jump in that fighter if you had the chance, that space fighter, and take it for a ride?
Hell yeah.
Absolutely.
Who wouldn't?
They stopped letting crew chiefs do rolling engine checks for a reason, because they kept taking off.
What's that? The rolling engine check for someone not in that field. Can you give a little bit of an explainer?
Back in the day, they used to let you do a full run up on the engines out on the runway, and you could roll it all the way down. Come back around, park it on the tarmac, just to do a good leak check, blah blah blah, things like that. And there were more than a few that kind of accidentally took off, so they stopped letting them do it.
Were they really accidents, or were they just wanted to see if they qualify some flight time?
Yeah, well, there's questions about that. Happened back in the F4 days. They didn't do it so much in the 80s because they stopped doing that like late 70s time frame.
Nice. All right, so we were talking about the culture around the flight units and their maintainers and such, and part of that, obviously, because Moggs and Shady have their own, and Hillbilly their own little unique monikers that they use that are part nickname and part maybe something else. So the call signs, the way they do that in books and TV and such, do you think that's part of the culture they get right? And if they get it right or get it wrong, can you guys elaborate for those of you that were Zoomies?
I mean, to some extent, they get it pretty close. Now, this is kind of the difference between aircraft, because every culture gives call signs differently. And so it's, if you for the Huey, not everybody has a call sign. I'm one of the few that, did something that ended up earning mine. A lot of the times, though, you're going to get a call sign that's, if you earn it, it's something dumb you did, right? It's never as cool as Maverick. Very rarely is a call sign like Shady given out, other than to both serve as a potential warning and, to kind of be one of those cool little monikers. So it's,
oh God,
there is, and Hillbilly knows exactly what I'm talking about. I'm sure Moggs does too. there are plenty of call signs out there that are not anywhere near Iceman or Maverick or any of those others. So it's
No.
I got one. I got one that beats them all. I was Rogue 4 in Iraq as a ground force unit. Rogue. To which is my favorite book series is Rogue Squadron. You know, because in my mind, Rogue 4, that's awesome. I was part of Rogue Squadron. That's how I built it up in my mind. Now, I wasn't in a X-Wing, which would have been freaking amazing, but I don't have the educational prowess to rate flying an aircraft. But I can do other things. And it was awesome to have that moniker of Rogue 4. And it took some convincing. And luckily, my battalion commander was a big Star Wars fan and facilitated that with the S6.
So I know when we were in Iraq doing the convoys, they used the call sign there too. And they officially, you had your unit call sign, which was really long and boring and a string of words and numbers that told exactly where you were on the pecking order. But obviously that's not as cool as call signs, which we thought we were stealing from like Hollywood. But what do you think about that one, Chris and William Joseph Roberts, otherwise known as Hillbilly?
Well,
Hillbilly?
I was just thinking about this because it's like Shady said. Trust me, if somebody out there really has a call sign Maverick or something, the story behind it would make you not want to have that call sign. Probably that's the thing, right? I mean, now there's a couple rules with this, right? When they get awarded in a unit, usually for something that's really stupid you did or something funny or embarrassing or whatnot. I mean, mine's an acronym. A lot of them are acronyms. I mean, things like Your Other Right Dumbass, which was the name of a guy named Yorda, for a pattern sortie that went awry. And I think Shady and Hillbilly can both understand maybe what happened there. And another guy who had the call sign Banjo, which was an acronym as well. And we'll just leave it at that. But there was two things always that went into namings, right? One was the 10% rule. The story had to be at least 10% true. And secondly, there was also the element of what we call the Nellis test, which is basically picture yourself with the Nellis O Club with your bros and everybody. You got your swag on, your flight suit, you got and this dude has a name tag with that on it, and he's representing you. Do you really want him to do that? And then all the traditions, like how you buy yourself out of like the worst names that are out there on the board that's offered up, and it's a whole mess. I mean, I just remember in Korea there was a lot of soju involved, and
soju's involved.
Well, on the Army side of the house, like your nicknames, your call signs were based on your F ups. You know,
it's the same basic idea. Yeah.
Well, okay.
I was Garber the Grenade for years because I would go with my buddies to the bar and I would jump on the unattractive larger females that would detract from my squad mates trying to hook up with the more attractive female. And I didn't care because all it cost me was like a pizza and some beer. You know? So I was the Grenade for the longest time. Luckily, that call sign never stuck outside of personal circles.
Well,
nice.
the one thing that I saw on my end was, most everybody had some kind of nickname or call sign. A lot of times, depending on what the name was, it was just a shortened version of the name. Instead of Wachowski, it was Ski.
Yeah.
Instead of Sergeant Stewart is Stewie or Stu, something like that. And you could tell which people were liked. But yeah, the ones that really screwed up, they're the ones that got the good call signs that you knew they screwed up from.
Admiral's daughter.
Mine was actually interesting. I got mine day 3 of boot camp.
What?
Yeah. My TI ended up giving me my call sign.
Just because your accent?
Huh?
Because your accent?
Sort of. So day 3 of boot camp, we'd already been through like 3 or 4 dorm chiefs at this point. And she brings us all into the day room. We're getting ready. She's getting ready to show us how to set up our drawers, do all the folding, all that kind of crap. And she gets a couple of Bibles off the side and props them under. We had those god awful metal school desks, and she props a couple of Bibles under one side of it so that we could see, because we're all sitting on the floor Indian style. And I just stand up, no reporting statement, nothing. I just like, ma'am, I'll hold that up if you take those out of there. And she looked at me with this like, are you stupid? You know? And it's like, does that offend you, Airman? It's like, no, ma'am, it's just disrespectful. I'll hold that for you if you go ahead and put them away. And I was going to go up there and hold the desk for her so she could do her thing. And she just blinked and looked at me. And she took the Bibles out. She set them over on the shelf, told everybody to stand up, and watched her fold the things. And we go back to our bunks. We start working on our drawers. Airman Hillbilly, front and center. Guess who got to be the new dorm chief? Yeah, that sucked. 40-some crying mama's boys getting their Dear John letters. Yeah. That was not fun. They actually whited out my graduation picture because my eyes were so bloodshot.
So you were tired?
That and stress for dealing with 40. We had 45, 46 in our flight. Yeah, it was not good. We had one guy that was washed back like for the third time, and we were ordered that he had to make it through because he was intelligence. Dude was an absolute genius. He couldn't get himself dressed in the morning. And we had this pattern. It's like, okay, these guys are tying his boots while that one's buttoning his blouse, get his ass out the door. We
had one of those, only he was a math genius and the Army wanted him for the finance stuff. But like I'm surprised he could breathe and walk at the same time.
Yeah,
the first time he tried to fire his M16, he put the buttstock on top of his shoulder and tried to fire that way. We had one on one side and me on the other qualifying for him. We just missed a lot for some reason and fired on his target instead. Funny how that happens.
Weird.
So was there anything people had as far as opinions on the way they handle in the books the call signs? It does seem like all the call signs there tend to be kind of, Top Gun-ish, over the top.
Cool sounding.
For the most part, they're not bad enough. They're not. There's too many good call signs and not enough. You fucked up. I mean, what was it the story that I tossed into the Blood, Sweat, and Steel? I did basically a little air crew, and you got Shipbrick because he shit himself. That's how those names come about.
Yeah. Well, or they're just that bad of a soldier that you call them Shipbrick.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and in that one, the main character, Mongo, actually went to high school with the guy. He was an Apache pilot. Good dude. He just retired recently, and he's now flying for airlines, flying the big boys. But he loved the story. It's like, cool. I got it right. And I was like, hey, dude, help me with some of the radio jargon because I don't know all of that.
I just call Chris when I need that stuff for the pilot stuff. I just bug him.
Actually, let Jamie.
Actually, I have this thing about call sign stories. I love them, and I love digging into them. And that was why I went into such detail when we wrote A Mother's Love. So, I mean, there's, I think, 4 different call sign stories in that one novelette, really. And none of them are about anybody doing anything cool.
Yeah, that's not how nicknames work.
The main character broke her arm slipping on applesauce. That's why her name is Sauce.
And that was the On Deadly Ground anthology, which was Heroic Last Stands in Space. Yeah. In my first draft, we had Denote doing the Forrest Whitaker eye when he read through it. He's like, no, JR, no, just it's not how any of this works on the rough drafts. Luckily, we had
they got so bad that I actually had little miniatures out. I'm whiteboarding. You
I know.
My Twitch went on so bad. I started whiteboarding.
You were sandtabling? Oh my god! So off. So officer. So colonel.
No, dude, I'm a weapons officer. I'm a patch. I whiteboarded that stuff, man. There was
Oh
no
my
sand table
God.
involved.
And I had to
That's funny,
translate
though.
this into Army in my head. So
Explain it to me because
I'm
I'm
sitting there,
Army
like,
and I need that explanation.
Read the story.
Dude,
It's
I'm
that
getting
good.
ready to get the airplanes on the sticks. I'm like ready to get the airplanes on the sticks and start like showing her like, no, what you're trying to do is
there were literally airplanes on sticks.
Nice.
Guys, stop.
Yeah, he didn't go full
What
fighter
comes
hand.
through the nose.
Well,
Oh my God.
when I was writing
Ooh.
Smuggler's Run with Chris Woods, I was doing that kind of shit because I was the one doing the flight scenes, and he was like the idiot savant pilot with the flying Winnebago, and I was doing that. I mean, I had a couple little cars or whatever, and I'm like, okay, cool, here and there, and I'm moving shit around, and it's like, but it worked
Oh
to
my
be able to
Lord.
visualize what I'm doing.
Yeah,
Y'all are insane.
Chris literally sent me a note, something to the effect of, "You can't do this to me on the day I'm not allowed to drink alcohol." I think we wrote the rough draft right around, what was it, the 40 days of Lent or whatever, and so he wasn't drinking. He's like, "You can't do it to me like right now. This is just wrong."
Hey, I'm a horrible Catholic. I say do what you want in Lent. You know, just don't kill anybody. Maybe eat a fillet of fish here and there, and you're good to go.
Okay,
So
quick side note: Space Above and Beyond. I found it on YouTube streaming. I can't find it anywhere else. So,
Bro, I'll send you the disc. Give me your address. I love that series, and I want to share that with you.
shit. Okay, I ain't going to argue about that one.
But if I can find an issue that's not going to cost me postage, I'm going to look into that too.
I will say video games, just jumping back on the call sign train real quick. The video games more than Hollywood movies are better about getting like call signs in there that when you think about it, you're like, oh, that's not for a good reason.
Yeah.
So what are some examples you've seen in video games?
Star Wars had that good one. That I think was it Battlefield 2? No. What was that game? It was Squad Combat. I can't remember the name. But all the call signs were based on goofy, dumb shit that they did, Empire and Rebellion alike.
Yeah.
And I love that. I wore my Luke Skywalker helmet when I played it because I'm that kind of nerd. It was great. It was great. It was a great video game.
So
I mean,
Shady,
the
what are some
Ace
examples?
Combat series did some real good ones. I can't think of one in particular off the top of my head, but it was one of those things where I didn't realize, because I started playing that series when I was a kid, and I didn't realize until years later, like what some of them actually meant. And you're just like, oh, I see what you did there.
Yeah, but that's
You're a terrible human being.
They did their research on that series, though. I mean, you get into the brass tacks of the aircraft, the ground crews. That's one of my favorite air combat series.
For sure. And honestly, it was Ace Combat that like really tipped my hand, because I was in between what I wanted to do when I grew up, and Ace Combat was like, oh, here's this great game about piloting. Why don't you become an Air Force pilot? And so I did, and that was kind of how it worked out for me.
I think you and I are from a different era of games when it comes to that. So I remember playing like Micro Pro's F-15E Strike Eagle sim, and it's all like wireframe graphics.
Yeah.
And they had the F-19 stealth fighter game too for a while. That was pretty cool and all that. So, but I mean, Ace Combat, it looks amazing, man. I mean, and as soon as you said that, I realized, holy crap, he's right, man. He's 100% right on this. Good call.
So what were some of the call signs that when you went back to Ace Combat that they were like, okay, I know what they were doing? Do you remember off the top of your head?
Well, one of the real obvious ones, I think it was 4 or 5, dropped in like a snafu, right? Like you had no idea what that meant when it first originally came out, but if you were part of the military, you knew exactly what it was, and it was a very on the nose, like call out to just, oh, situation normal, all fucked up, got it.
Okay. So what is something that the modern representation of air power in middle sci-fi you think that they're doing right? So we don't, go all Debbie Downer.
Drones.
Okay, go on.
The increasing role that drones are going to end up playing over time, and mixed manned and unmanned systems. I think a lot of writers are getting that right. That's one thing I think is really going to make an impact. I mean, just look at what's going on in Ukraine, or pay attention to what's going on in the Red Sea right now. I think that's a big one. I think another thing that they do real well is the fact just get a lot of the high performance stuff. Just with the way technology's been heading, as well. You know what I mean? It's without can't get too far into it, but I think just the performance of the machines themselves, when it comes to speed, altitude, distance, range, and all that. That's long range, big stick weapons. I think is another one that I think a lot of writers are getting pretty well as well.
Okay, Shady.
Trying to think of something I've read recently, and it's nothing currently coming to mind right off the bat. Although the series that I read in the Four Horsemen universe usually does pretty good with space combat stuff. In my mind, the real big one that I can think of is a movie, and I thought, and Moggs again kind of tipped me off on it with the drones piece. Star Trek's kind of like swarm of drones attack idea was another big one that I think will probably come to pass.
Okay, Billy.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with the drones and all, because anywhere you can take the body out, the equipment can do the job better, even remotely, just because you don't have to worry about the life attached to it. It's a lot more expensive to train somebody than it is to replace hardware. But yeah, Star Trek did a really good job of it. There's a lot of parts of Discovery that I didn't like, but having those drones and all that they were working with, that was a good part.
Okay. Do you think that you're ever going to get to a point where it's all drones with operators, way back in the rear, where it's drone on drone almost, instead of actual man in combat situation?
Absolutely not.
No, I mean you got to have eyes on a scene sometimes. So you're going to at least at minimum have observers, but I don't think so.
I don't think they're going to take people completely out of the loop either. I think it's going to be a mixed future. The ratio might change, where you might have dozens, if not even hundreds, of unmanned aircraft. And the other thing too is you're going to have them at all sizes, from like the quadcopters today up to who knows how big. So you might have more unmanned systems out there than manned. And one of the things that a future pilot might really need to be is almost like merging pilot plus air battle manager plus a multitasking drone operator. Because and I actually wanted to bring this up. Another thing that I think some writers and shows do really well is showing just how task saturated that you can end up being in there. And that's
what you're talking about is
really
something that a human being has to be in charge of that. A computer cannot multitask that many systems. We're not that advanced. Maybe one day, and even if it is, we don't want to be there. You got to have the experience of your pilots. And I think that's the thing that we're all overlooking here, because we want to talk about drones, but drones are great, but it's still a guy playing a video game. But I would still prefer a guy inside a fighter craft with his resources, I said he or she's experience in that fighter craft and the capabilities, doing what they do. I don't see that drones are going to be able to do that. I think it kind of cuts that connection between fighter craft and pilot. So, and when you take the fear out of the loop, I think that's a big factor. So in a drone, you don't have that fear of being shot down. You don't have that fear of being destroyed. So I think that adds a competitive edge in a fighter pilot. that can't be replicated by AI, can't be replicated by drone piloting. It's something that has to have that human touch to it.
So let's go back a little bit to note when you said the amount of task saturation. What did you mean by that? For those that aren't as in the know, like me.
Well, no, Shady could give you a better explanation of what that means. I'm just, like thinking back, it's one thing when you're driving a car. Now it's another thing, like you think about JR, and now you're running an entire convoy and you're driving your own vehicle in it. Now you're, now you're not just putting together one convoy. Now you're simultaneously getting multiple convoys on the move, and you're in charge of your one convoy, and you're in charge of your own truck. To kind of put that, and you're doing this all at the same time.
Gotcha.
But
and on top of that, you're handling radios, like taking a phone call from your boss, and then you're taking another call from a different boss all at the same time. Sorry,
that would suck. So, do you think, to answer that task saturation and your ability to multitask, in some science fiction, you see a lot where people basically jack themselves straight into the machine. So the machine becomes almost an extension of the body. But you guys have both been in the air, putting yourself to extremes of capability with regard to speed and whatnot. Do you think that's possible? You think the human body can do that without some extra, hand wavium magic?
I think Pacific Rim is a good example of that.
Yeah, to some degree, we get a little bit of that, but Pacific Rim doesn't remove the body from the machine, right? They put you in a room in the machine, and you still get to feel it a little bit. And a lot of the
you have to share it with another person.
Yeah, a lot of the mech stuff, they're always really good about talking about how it feels, right? And to me, that's always been a decent thing. But kind of, I'm gonna merge these two questions a little bit because, do we go full drone, that kind of thing, and Nick hit it with the fear, and I'll put a different name to it, which is called air sense. And it's one of the things that when you get a new pilot, they have no air sense. They have no idea that anything's going wrong, right? And it's not something that you can overtly teach. We can talk about it. I can tell them, hey, this is how I'm this is what I watch for. This is what I'm feeling. But everybody learns it at a different pace. Everybody learns it in a different way. And when you go to try and move that into the drone aspect, you lose that feeling and you lose a little bit of that self-preservation that is there to keep you alive. And suddenly your senses kind of slow down a little bit more. Now it can be made up for in some instances with technology, but it's a tough thing. And that is, years and years out from what I can see. I mean, they told us when I first joined, when I got into helos, they told us we were going to be replaced by like 2015, 2016. And we're still flying the Huey.
You're not.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like the purest form of flying that there is left. That thing does not fly itself. In fact, it is actively trying to kill you while you fly it. So it's, there is a certain amount of like, oh yeah, it'd be wonderful if we could do this. But there's a lot of innate abilities that come from just sitting in the aircraft and feeling out the situation. And then Moggs had touched on it, like being able to see it. And I think Hillbilly touched on it too, being able to see a situation occurring live versus through a feed. And until they fix that delay for haptic sensing and for your ability to read a situation, and until they get rid of that delay, it's going to be next to impossible to truly replace pilots in every situation.
Right.
Well, okay.
Okay, so let me introduce a question here that you touched on, Shady, here, dealing with drones specifically. And this is going to be directed towards Hillbilly here, who on the maintenance side, who's seen a lot of pilots come and go. The self-preservation of the human species in a combat environment. We have to recognize that is a factor in how things are played, and that's something that's kind of removed when you're flying a drone, because you don't have self-preservation there. It's a piece of machinery that's going to die if you F up. So that's my question, is like, how much do we weigh the human experience and self-preservation and how we operate aircraft in a combat environment? I think Hillbilly's probably the best guy to answer this because he's seen pilots come and go. I mean, I'm talking to two pilots and one intelligence guy who have a lot of knowledge. I'm not going to take away from that. But maintenance guys see people come and go. They see how they fly the aircraft, how they respect the aircraft, and how they treat the aircraft. So I think it's probably the best answer for Hillbilly to give. And maybe I had too much of a spotlight on you, but Hillbilly, weigh in.
Well, when it comes to something like that, I mean, if we got to the point where we had full-fledged haptic feedback, plug and play, you got issues if you get any kind of EMP burst, any kind of disruption in the electronic system. I mean, honestly, I hate the freaking fly-by-wire throttle control on the wife's truck, because as soon as you get a little electrical surge, now you have no throttle control. So that thing can go full open, full closed. You're just done. There's a lot of them.
It's Land 6. Why are you driving it so hard, honey?
Yeah. Even some of the steering on the newer vehicles, same kind of thing. The F-16 is a completely fly-by-wire aircraft, and I hate that. I mean, F-15, it's still mechanically controlled. You have turnbuckles, you have cables, and even if you lost hydraulics, you still had some control over the flight because it was still mechanically controlled. You had the fallback, but that was also a triple, quadruple redundant system in some cases, depending on what it was. I mean, you've got so many potential issues to work out before we even got to that point. Not to mention having backups if something does go wrong. The pilot's got to be able to manually control the aircraft without any of the hookup controls. So you're doing double the duty. They're going to have to learn how to fly it with and without at that point. Because if they don't know how to fly it without, well, they're kind of screwed as soon as the AI goes offline and they're no longer jacked in. They're just flying a dead stick at that point.
Like,
would
one
you
thing
say that, like, I'm sorry, Chris, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna do like, hey man, like one little point of clarity is like I said, I mean, I'm not a pilot. I mean, I will say that I flew enough to make me a really good air intel officer, because it's one thing that you to talk tactics when you just read it from a book and you're recommending it to someone how to defeat a SAM. It's another thing if you've actually sat in a cockpit and you're debriefing a guy and you actually have a sense of how little you could see when you're moving that fast, that high, or whatnot, and it just gives you it gave me a really good perspective and a leg up. But yeah, no, man, I didn't even finish my private pilot's license, and and then nobody calls the tweet a high performance, machine right there. I mean, if you ever seen the thing, they gave it that name for a reason. When you look at and hear the engines going.
Yeah.
So, to bring this home, because we would be going at it, we probably have room for some more episodes, and we'll get the band back together when everyone can slightly upgrade their Wi-Fi, because there was some lag going on today. But what advice would you give, like if you're sitting there and the expert of all things Zoomy, what advice would you give to creators that want to make it more believable, either for their games at home that they're playing with friends, if they're writing books, games, or movie scripts, or all the things? What advice would you give on accurately portraying the ideas behind air power?
Research. I mean, straight up research.
Sure.
Go to a VFW or something like that and start talking to people. Get firsthand knowledge from pilots, from air crew that were there. That's invaluable. I mean, when I was
maybe talk to the guys that you're supporting.
When I was working on Widowmakers, I went down to the Warner Robins Air Museum. I volunteered down there, so I turned wrenches on that B-17 and put the brake lines and stuff on there. And they let me climb all over the B-17, the B-25, the A-26, and I got to play with these aircraft. So I got to get in them, touch them, smell them, the whole works, so I could write those scenes and know the aircraft better. Talk with some older pilots that had flew these things, hit different Facebook groups that were full of people that were either enthusiasts, ex-mil, had some kind of, like, you know, the Confederate Air Force. They worked on some of these aircraft. So yeah, research, ask questions.
No,
What about you?
and that's good. That's good, Hillbilly. I would also add in that talk to the ground forces to which you're supporting.
Yeah.
You know, because that I don't want to take away from anybody that can fly a sophisticated aircraft. But at the end of the day, you're here to support my dumbass with a rifle and a backpack, closed with and destroying the enemy. That's your job. You know, I'm not taking anything away from that because I can't fly an aircraft. I tried to
that's
hijack a Black Hawk once
talk
and
to the
it failed
people that
miserably.
did those jobs. You know, some things,
but
depending on who they are and what they did, they can't talk about everything, but you can get a pretty damn good idea and be able to write realistic.
No, I get it, man. It's like I totally respect my aerial superiority, my Air Force guys, my Apache pilots, my Cobra pilots, those guys. They do something I can't do. My job on the ground is to close with and destroy the enemy through fire and maneuver. That's my job. Your job is to support me, but I don't look at it like your job is. No, your job is very combat oriented. You know, it's a symphony when you're on the ground. And I
Right, but
respect
just
every aspect of it.
right, but keep this in mind too, and this is the reason why it's an air power discussion. Is air power does more than ground support, though. All right, I mean, yeah, we can argue about the effectiveness of strategic bombing or whatnot, you know, but there's a lot that goes into it, and that's sort of like where my advice for writers comes in. It actually is read nonfiction. If you read one of Hap Arnold's books, believe it or not, he was talking about a wireless radio controlled drone that the Germans were building in 1917 that they brought home. It's called the Bug. And he was talking about that sort of thing back in the early 1900s. I mean, secondly, there's a lot of good nonfiction out there, and I'll actually put my camera on for a second so you can see some of the books I recommend. This book.
Well, it's really awesome that you brought that up because drone combat, not a lot of people understand that it started so early in the early 1900s in World War I.
Right. Well, my point being here is, okay, so this book, Debrief, it's a complete history of U.S. aerial engagements, 1981 to the present. So this covers Gulf of Sidra all the way through Serbia, Kosovo, and all that sort of stuff. And what you'll strike you about it is you see just how different, like truly modern post-Vietnam air combat is compared to the time earlier. And along those lines, too, to really see how that transformed, I'll just rattle off a couple titles real quick and shut up because I want to hear Shady's perspective on this, absolutely. But anything by Brian Lasley, especially The Air Force Way of War, that's a good one to pick up. I'd also recommend Sierra Hotel by Dick Anderegg. If you ever heard of that one, that's a good one. If you really want to get into some of the esoteric stuff, America's Secret MiGs, the story of the Constant Peg program, kind of give you some cool insights there. And even for World War II, there's no shortage of good books. Even to just kind of get back in that and you see the battle between like people talking about tactical air power and supporting the ground fight versus strat bombing and who, what the arguments they were actually putting forward were, right? Nobody's downplaying the important role of supporting the ground fight, even though at different times you've had different theorists who got it way wrong and saying, "Oh, that'll never be a thing ever again."
That's not the point I was making, Chris. I was really making a point of like the symphony of aerial combat along with ground forces and support. How everything's. I know my type. I know the grunt. I know the infantry. They want to make it seem like the whole goddamn world would fall apart if it wasn't for us, which is not the case because I was one of those Mustangs that understood the inclusive symphony of combat. It requires everything: naval support fire, air support fire. Like we all make this thing work. So that was my point. Hopefully I didn't offend anybody. And I would love 6 months alone with your library because you have some good shit.
Okay. And Shady, did you have anything you wanted to weigh in, advice you'd give?
Yeah. To be honest, like, you know, Moggs and Hillbilly and Nick have all thrown in some great points. I would, you know, once you've done the research, that kind of thing. But I would start with determine if you're trying to be entertaining versus right. Because to me, like, when I go to pick up a book or I go to watch a movie, if I am set up with the expectation that the entertainment value is there and that, yeah, I'm going to get a little bit of hand wavium, I'm going to get a little bit of maybe inaccurate depiction, that's great, right? When I didn't go into Top Gun Maverick thinking that I was going to get the most accurate thing ever, I went in for the entertainment value, right? And we knew that's what we were getting into. So if you know that's the expectation you're trying to set, then you can kind of step it to, all right, what kind of research do I need? How deep do I need to go down this rabbit hole? And then keep your descriptions simpler, right? And it makes it so much easier to write, especially when you don't quite have the experience. It's hard to tell you what a helmet fire feels like until I put you in the aircraft and then give you a helmet fire and tell you to do all of these things and then make you watch me do it after years of experience, right? It's hard to do that. So it's, you know, determine if you want to get more right or, you know, more accurate. And I'm not saying don't do the research, right? That's not what I'm saying at all. But if something is going, you know, this is where kind of the old D&D rule of cool for me plays in. If the scene works better and you can find a way to make it work and make it believable, or make it not believable, but just make it work in the universe you've set up and you've set the tone already, go for it.
Well, now part of that also depends on how you're going to write it. Are you doing cinematic physics or are you doing actual physics? Because everything that David Weber does, he does actual physics. He doesn't deviate. And if you bounce back and forth, you're going to confuse your readers and it's not going to be as enjoyable.
Well, I mean, you got to find that balance too. Like when you talk about physics, a lot of that stuff is boring as hell. You know, those of us that have studied any type of physics, astronomical physics, you know, all that stuff, it can get a little dry. You got to get a little interesting.
Well, you know, the Death Star run in Star Wars was one of the greatest World War II battle scenes ever.
Yeah.
I mean, it was squadron maneuvers, going in, hitting the hard target, coming back around for another pass. Like, it was just beautiful. But it was straight World War II tactics they had in there.
Yeah. Well, Rogue One had a great, you know, fighter symmetry type battle going on right there. You had giant naval ships supporting the main effort, which is the individual fighters, so they get in and do surface runs for the ground forces that were there. I don't agree with a lot of what Star Wars did, but that one they did right. A New Hope they did right, I think, based on the limited amount of research I did. So I'm no expert by any means or stretch of the imagination, but.
All right, you were about to say something?
There's a podcast too that I think you can listen to.
Air-Minded podcast.
Yeah, the Air-Minded podcast. It's by a buddy of mine, and there's a lot of good historical episodes that he did. Tyson Wetzel is the guy's name.
Okay, I'll get the link for the Air-Minded podcast and throw that in the show notes.
That's why I do this, so I have new podcasts and more things to occupy my time.
Now, is the Air-Minded podcast, is that more like in the know kind of thing, or is he speaking to the everyday reader, listener, denote? Oh man, they froze.
Let's break it down.
Then, you know, books about Bud Day, was a POW. Also, are pretty good. I mean, it's all Vietnam era stuff and earlier, but still, they're really well written and really enjoyable.
And
oops, sorry.
They locked up.
Yep, they locked up. Shady, did you have anything you wanted to add to that? I saw you nodding along for some of it.
No, I mean he was going on the memoirs and bio stuff. Bud Day, Robin Olds both have really great memoirs to read. But you know, even just doing, like, if you jump into just some of the memoirs of Vietnam vets, like a lot of the things that I learned about flying a Huey, you know, I got lucky, and the guys who were teaching me originally were old Vietnam era vets, and that was you know, part of going through Mother Rucker, as you Army guys like to call it, was getting to learn some of the lessons that they learned without having to go through the shit that they went through. So,
Nope, we lost him.
Yeah, we lost him. Yeah, I
They'll
think
be back.
I think generally speaking, the military sci-fi audience tends to be a lot of Navy guys and a lot of Army guys. I don't know from just, I mean, I haven't done a scientific study of the reading audience, but just from the comments I get and what I see. So I do think that definitely colors things because growing up around the Navy, my experience with Navy pilots and Marine Corps pilots by extension versus like the Air Force guys I've met, it's you might as well be talking to two different countries at some level. I mean, sure, you guys are flying the same plane, the same jet, the same helicopter, but the culture is so radically different. It's like, wait, are they even in the same military, right? Well, I mean, obviously they're not, but I think all of that matters too when you start looking at it. So if you're listening, dear listener, and you have recommendations for books that you think on the concept of military history from an air power perspective that you want to recommend, when you're listening, throw that in the show notes. And if you have more questions for our guests, you can ask them wherever we post it with the comments, and I'll make sure and pester them until they answer you if you've got targeted questions at anybody. With that being said, as we wrap this up, because otherwise we'll go for hours and hours and hours, and I would enjoy it, and you might not, dear listener, I'm going to ask what everyone's working on, and if any of it is air power related. We'll start with you, Shady.
Sorry, you're going to have to repeat that one to me again. I got lost in what you were saying.
So I was telling the guests that if they're listening and they have questions, ask us in the comments wherever we post it. And then I asked what everyone's writing and if what they're writing has air power in it.
Yeah, so currently I'm writing a Mills sci-fi story. Well, it's really a noir story masquerading as Mills sci-fi. And I haven't written anything air power related. And I got nothing. I might have one on the docks. We'll see. But that'll come out. If it does, it'll be very minimal. But yeah, for now, since I'm still active duty, I kind of avoid anything I know just so I can't get questioned on it.
All right. So before we lose you again, to note, we were asking if what are you writing right now and does it have air power in it?
Nothing present day. That's for sure, for the same reasons that Shady brought up. Right now, I'm just trying to focus on the reviews for upstream and take care of the day job's pretty busy right now. So hopefully get some more time a little closer to retirement and then can start doing some things more full time.
Nice. Hillbilly, lay it on us. What are you writing and does it have air power in it?
Some air power. It's the first modern JTF novel, Blacktooth Grin. It's mixed military unit. So there's Army, there's Marines, there's Air Force. Actually, I've got a couple of Tuckerizations in there too that folks might recognize. Not a lot of air power work, just a little bit, just a touch, because this one's going to be more ground forces on the unit, because it's an extension from my original Widowmaker's novel in JTF, and the unit has grown from when they were originally thrown together in France in World War II. So
the JTF universe is basically a Mills sci-fi paranormal where they're fighting like monsters, correct?
More or less, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Car Wars could have air power. I've seen them do some ramps where they kind of flew for a little bit. Does that count?
Oh dear God. Yeah, we've done a bit of that already. That's that one's been insane on some of the car combat, the gunnery. Figuring out how some of these weapons would work on a car as a platform versus on an aircraft has been interesting. So yeah.
Okay. All right. And so with that, we're going to go ahead, Nick.
I was just saying my consultation services are available Monday through Friday from 7 to 16.
So now that we've said that, I'm going to let everyone say where they can find you on the wild interwebs, and we will link to all of that in the show notes and denotes, because I know your signal has been a little bit wonky. Where can they find you guys?
Go ahead, Jay.
Amazon. I have titles under my own name, Jamie Denote, and I have titles under my pseudonym, Lishka McCabe. Yeah, that's where you can find me.
And since you had muted for a second, what are you writing? Because you didn't say either. And does it have air power in it?
I actually am working on something currently. It does have air power. It is not present day, nor is it future. It's alt history, dealing with airships, dirigibles in World War One. And I'm writing that with Mike Williamson.
Sounds fun. All right, and we've got your social media. Shady, where can they find you on the wild, wild webs?
Oh, well, they can find me at www.davidshdoyne.com. You can find me published under my name, David Shdoyne, pretty much through CKP currently. And then Chris Kennedy Publishing, that is. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. Every once in a while, you'll catch me on YouTube doing podcasts like this. And you won't find me flying anywhere near Jamie, so that way she doesn't shoot me down.
All right, what about you, Hillbilly? How can they find you on the wild, wild webs?
You can find my stuff either over at WilliamJosephRoberts.com or at ThreeRavensPublishing.com. Name the social media platform. I've probably got an account on it.
He is a little bit of a digital
I'm a whore.
evening. I was trying to avoid that word, but sure.
No, I'm an internet whore, but yeah, it works. I shotgun it out.
All right. And you can find us on our Linktree, linktr.ee, Linktree/Blasters and Blades podcast. Again, Linktree/Blasters and Blades podcast, where we link to all the things, the BitChutes, the Rumbles, the YouTubes, the Twitters. We have our email, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com for professional purposes only, also linked at the Linktree. We have our Facebook group and Facebook page for Blasters and Blades in the Linktree. And finally, we have Madam Stabby Stabs on Instagram, Twitter, and email, where if you're brave enough, you can send her hate mail and she will make you cry. And finally, we have our website, anchor.fm/blasters tech blades. Again, anchor.fm/blasters-and-blades, where for as little as 99 cents a month, you can help keep the lights on. Or you can support the show more directly at buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Be sure to put in the comment section this for the podcast, and I promise I will keep my co-hosts duly caffeinated. They will drink until the Java pours out of their eyeballs. And with that being said, we'll be back next week at the same time, where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom. Thanks for coming, guys. This was fun, and hopefully we can do it with a little better, I don't know, atmospheric pressure so the Wi-Fi works a little better, task some satellites or something. I don't know. I hear
you put on your aluminum foil hat, man.
So is there any truth to the rumor to note that you can move satellites for us with your mind?
Oh, with my mind? Oh yeah. So it's with my mind, dude. You better put that tinfoil on. I'm going to get you.
All right. Thanks for coming.
Right, I'm out.